Every expedition motorhome you have ever seen was built with the same flawed logic. Take a truck frame, bolt a box on top, and call it capable. That is not engineering. That is compromise wearing a roof rack. This concept throws that entire philosophy into the ocean and replaces it with something borrowed directly from the ocean itself. Before we go any further, what you are looking at is an AI-generated fictional concept. No factory, no production line, no showroom anywhere in the world. Pure imagination. And honestly, that is exactly what makes this worth your next 18 minutes. Because when you remove real-world manufacturing constraints, you see what design could become. The name on the wall behind this vehicle is Aurea Mobility. And the design language here did not come from a motorhome manufacturer. It came from naval architecture, the discipline that builds racing yachts capable of surviving the most violent ocean environments on Earth. Here is what we are breaking down today. We are walking the exterior, and there is something happening at that roofline I genuinely have not seen on a land vehicle before. We are going inside, and the zone layout here follows a logic that most motorhome designers have never even considered. We are getting into the powertrain thinking, and at the end, I'm going to tell you the one specific thing I would change about this concept, and why it is also the most interesting decision in it. Let's go. Stand in front of this vehicle for 10 seconds and tell me what you feel. Not what you think, what you feel. Because that front face is not designed to look friendly. It is designed to communicate one thing with absolute clarity. This machine does not negotiate with terrain. Those angular LED headlight signatures cut into the fascia like something from a fighter jet. Sharp, purposeful, aggressive without being theatrical. The chrome-edged Aurea badge sits dead center, surrounded by a dark mesh grille that suggests serious airflow management underneath. You are not being welcomed. You are being assessed. Now step back and look at the proportions. This is a 6x6 configuration, 3 axles, 6 wheels, all of them wrapped in what appear to be serious all-terrain rubber with enough sidewall to absorb impacts that would destroy a conventional motorhome chassis. But here is what I want you to notice. Despite that massive footprint, this concept does not look heavy. And that is not an accident. That is naval architecture at work. The yacht connection is not cosmetic. The philosophy behind a high-performance ocean-going vessel is that structure and weight are not the same thing. You can have enormous structural rigidity while carrying far less mass than a conventional build, if you know how to distribute load correctly and choose materials accordingly. That thinking is embedded in every line of this exterior. Look at the side profile. The body does not climb, it flows. There is a deliberate horizontal tension to the roofline that keeps your eye moving forward, exactly like the deck line of a long-range expedition yacht. The glass-to-body ratio on that upper deck is extraordinary. A continuous band of dark-tinted glass runs almost the full length of the upper level. And we're going to talk about what that means for the interior in a moment, because the implications are significant. The two-level architecture is worth spending time on. Most dual-level concepts look top-heavy because the designer stacks volume directly on top of volume. Here, the upper level is recessed and capped. It sits within the roofline rather than sitting on top of it. That is a subtle distinction that makes an enormous visual and structural difference. Your eye reads it as confident rather than precarious. The paint. Champagne metallic with gold accent trim. I want to be direct about this. It works, and it should not work as well as it does. Gold accents on an expedition vehicle is a genuinely risky design call. On most builds it reads as garish. Here it reads as deliberate, because the base tone is muted enough to absorb it. This is a vehicle designed for someone who has already proven they can go anywhere, and is no longer interested in looking like they are trying. At the rear, the 6x6 stance is at its most commanding. 6 massive tires in close formation give the rear of this concept a planted, immovable quality. And there is one decision at the very rear of this vehicle, hidden in the geometry of that tail section, that I am saving for the verdict. because it connects directly to the naval architecture thinking in a way that changes how you read the entire design. Inside this concept, I think something genuinely unusual is happening. Let me show you why. Let me be clear about what I am doing in this section. There are no official interior renders for this concept. What I am doing is detective work, reading the exterior geometry, the proportions, the glass placement, and the two-level architecture to construct the most logical interior this concept could contain. This is how serious design analysis works. The exterior always tells you what the interior intends to be. Start with ceiling height, because this is where the 6x6 configuration changes everything. Those wheels are large, based on the tire's sidewall diameter relative to the door height. This vehicle sits significantly higher off the ground than a conventional motorhome. Combined with the double-deck architecture, the lower level of this concept almost certainly clears 2 meters of standing height with room to spare. You are not ducking. You are not hunching. You are standing in a space that does not remind you that you are inside a vehicle. That matters more than any specification number. The psychological difference between a space where you have to adjust your body and a space where your body forgets where it is. That is the difference between camping and living. Now the zone layout. Based on the exterior proportions, I am reading 5 distinct zones across the habitable length. The cockpit sits behind that aggressive front face, and given the naval architecture philosophy driving this concept, I would expect it to function more like a ship's bridge than a conventional driver's seat. Panoramic forward visibility through that steeply raked windscreen, digital instrumentation that processes terrain data in real time, and very likely autonomous highway capability as a framing intent. You sit in this cockpit and you are not driving to a destination. You are navigating toward one. Behind the cockpit, the lounge zone. This is where that full-length upper-deck glass band pays its dividend. Imagine a living space with a continuous glass wall running above eye level on both sides. Natural light does not just enter this space, it defines it. You are not looking out of a window. You are suspended inside a glass pavilion that happens to be moving through a mountain pass at 120 kilometers per hour. The kitchen. Naval architecture applies directly here. And this is where I think the concept gets genuinely interesting. A yacht galley is engineered around one constraint that most landlocked designers never consider. Everything must function under movement, under vibration, under lateral force. That means nothing hangs loose. Nothing slides. Every surface, every appliance, every storage solution is integrated structurally, not decoratively. If this concept applies that logic, and every signal in the exterior suggests it does, then the kitchen is not a kitchen. It is a precision workspace. The sleeping quarters on the upper level. This is where I want you to stop and think about what that continuous glass band actually means at night. You are horizontal. Above you, or beside you at eye level, depending on the bed orientation, is a continuous band of glass showing you exactly what is outside. Sleeping in this concept, parked at altitude, above the tree line, with nothing between you and the sky except that glass. That is not a camping experience. That is a different category of existence entirely. Bathroom. The constraints here are real. Water management in a vehicle of this complexity, gray water, black water, freshwater reserves, requires either very clever engineering or significant space sacrifice. Based on the exterior volume, I think this concept has the footprint for a genuine walk-in shower with a proper door rather than a curtain. That is not a small distinction if you are living in this vehicle for 3 weeks at a stretch. Smart systems. Climate management in a dual-level vehicle is not simple. The thermal dynamics of 2 stacked living spaces require independent zone control rather than a single unit. Solar across that substantial roofline feeds into battery reserves that can sustain interior systems for extended periods without external power. And the connectivity architecture, predictive route planning, terrain mapping, satellite communication. This concept is not built to go places with cell coverage. It is built to go places where cell coverage is a rumor. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. The exterior of this vehicle communicates military-grade capability. The interior, if the design philosophy holds, communicates something much quieter, the confidence of a space that has already solved every problem before you arrived. That is the hardest thing to design, and it is exactly what the best ocean-going yachts achieve. If this concept were ever engineered for reality, the powertrain conversation starts with one question, and it is not horsepower. It is weight distribution. Naval architecture teaches you that a heavy vessel is not inherently slow or incapable if the weight is placed correctly. The keel of a racing yacht carries mass deliberately low and centered. That mass is not a problem. It is a tool. It is what gives the vessel stability under lateral force. The same logic, applied to a 6x6 expedition motorhome, suggests mounting the heaviest components, battery packs, power management systems, water reserves, as low as possible in the chassis structure. Below the floor, close to the axle line. In a near-future production scenario, you are looking at a full electric drive system. Not because electric is fashionable, because at the power delivery characteristics required to move a vehicle of this mass across rough terrain, electric motors provide instant torque without the mechanical complexity of a transmission. Each axle pair potentially carries its own drive unit. Six-wheel traction with independent torque control at each axle. The implications for low-traction surfaces, snow, mud, loose rock, are significant. Battery capacity at this scale, drawing from what companies like Volta Trucks and BYD are engineering for heavy commercial EVs, would likely sit in the 400 to 600 kilowatt-hour range. That is not a car battery. That is a small power station on wheels. The solar roof is not a primary propulsion source. Let me be direct about that. At the scale of even a large roof surface, solar generation covers interior systems, climate, lighting, water heating, connectivity. What it provides is off-grid sustainability. You park this concept at altitude for a week. The solar roof keeps the interior systems alive without touching the primary battery reserves. The smart systems layer is where this concept anticipates the next 5 years of vehicle technology. Learning climate that understands your patterns. Predictive charging that maps elevation changes and plans regenerative braking windows. Terrain analysis that adjusts suspension stiffness based on surface type before you feel the change yourself. If this were ever built, it would not be a vehicle you drive. It would be a vehicle you collaborate with. Let me give you my honest assessment. What this concept does genuinely well, and I want to be specific, is the proportion game on that two-level architecture. The decision to recess and cap the upper level rather than stacking it conventionally is the single most resolved design call in this entire concept. It is the reason a vehicle this large reads as intentional rather than excessive. In a design school critique, that roofline is the first thing you point to. What concerns me practically, and this is a real criticism, is the gold accent trim. I understand the positioning intent, but on an expedition vehicle, trim that references opulence creates a tension with the terrain capability the rest of the design is communicating. It is a small thing visually. It is not a small thing philosophically. You are sending two messages simultaneously, and they are pulling in slightly different directions. The most impressive single detail in this entire concept is that upper deck continuous glass band. Not because glass is impressive in itself, but because of what it signals about the designer's priority. They chose light and connection to the environment over thermal insulation and structural simplicity. That is a confident design decision. It is expensive to engineer correctly, and it is the thing that separates a vehicle you travel in from a vehicle you live in. The one thing I would change, and this is specific, is the front bumper geometry. That lower fascia treatment is the only place in this design where the naval architecture influence drops away and something more conventional takes over. A concept this resolved deserves a front end that references the same fluid logic as the rest of the structure. The bow of an expedition yacht does not look like a truck bumper. This one still does, slightly. What this concept signals about where luxury mobility is heading is worth sitting with. The era of luxury, meaning excess, is over. The next phase of genuinely premium travel concepts is going to look exactly like this. Restrained on the surface, extraordinarily engineered underneath, and built around the idea that the environment you are moving through is not something to be insulated from. It is the point. It is an AI-generated concept. It is fictional. It will never roll off a production line. And it is still one of the most coherent expedition vehicle design philosophies I have analyzed on this channel. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. And I am genuinely curious about this one. Upper deck glass panorama or fully insulated sleeping quarters? Which do you actually want when you are parked at -10 degrees in the mountains? There is no wrong answer. But there is definitely a debate. Drop it below. If this kind of analysis, where we dissect design logic rather than just admire renders, is what you come to YouTube for, subscribing is the most efficient way to not miss the next one.